Okay, and you mentioned Pharaoh, and so that leads me into my next question. Um, like World War III is one of my favorite songs on Sound Bombing too.
Ah,
Like
thank you.
I love, yeah, no doubt, man. I love Pharaoh's first verse on that, and like also those horns. So
Ah,
like so when you're picking samples for beats, do you like skip through the record and kind of just find what you want like that, or do you like play the whole song and then you hear it and kind of conceptualize it in your mind? Like how do you do it?
it depends on the record. That particular record was Cool in the Game, and
Hmm.
the record itself was kind of like disco-y. Like, so it's
Yeah.
not necessarily something you would hear and feel like, okay, this is an old soul record. This is a great record to sample. I'm gonna sit here and meditate on it. Um, it was really a moment that I found, and it depends on the record how I kind of approach it. With that particular record,
Hmm.
I was listening to it, needle dropping, just kind of going along, seeing what it was. I didn't think it was going to be anything. It was a relatively more recent
Yeah.
Cool in the Gang record because it was something from the late 70s, which,
Yeah.
at that particular time was like a kind of a no man's era, like
Right.
nobody was
Right.
really flipping stuff from that era. But
Yeah.
I liked the way it felt, and I felt like there was something there that I could create kind of a boom bap groove from that
Yeah.
horn. But that's not typical. Like, it depends on the record. Some records are to me so special that I don't even work on them because the approach is not there for me yet. But
Yeah.
some records are like no brainers. It's the first opening line. It's open, no drums in it. Feels good. Let's go. But other songs I have to listen to and kind of feel out what it is that I appreciate, and hopefully um, bring something to them, and not necessarily improve, but to kind of reinvent it and make it just as good, or if not better, in our format of hip hop. That
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I have a real respect for the record, the original. When I'm
Right. Right. Do you remember what drum machine that you made that beat on?
it probably, yeah. Oh yeah, that would have been the 12 SP 1200 and the
Okay.
950. That would have been most of Internal Affairs was the 12 and 950. The stuff that I worked on and stuff that me and Mach worked on. One song, I think it was Hell. Hell was the only record that I worked on that I used the 2000.
Hmm.
MPC 2000, but everything else was SP 1200. And the interesting thing about what I did is, even though I was working on the MPC 2000, I sampled my drums in the 12 and then resampled them back into the 2000 because I wasn't quite ready to break away from the 1200.
Yeah.
So I was like, I gotta keep that grittiness. And my engineer at the time, Troy Hightower, he was telling me, it's like, man, how you gonna leave the 1200 and you're gonna miss that low bit sampling? And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's true. All right, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna sample 12 and then go back into the 2.
So
That's what I did.
Are the drums. So are the SP 1200 drums like really better in that regard as far as the grittiness than like the MPC 2000 or whichever? Did you say it was MPC 2000?
Correct. The thing was, that was the talk, right? Like everybody at that time, because we're in a period where people were using the MPC 3000, the 2000 had just dropped. And a lot of people had a lot of hate for the 2000 because the 2000 was a little bit less expensive and it wasn't as kind of, I guess, prestigious as the 3. So the 12 was still golden era legacy machinery. So people believed that it had better drums, the grittiness that it brought to the table. But, in hindsight and in listening to it today and kind of having more experience, I don't know that it made much of a difference sonically, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think it coming out of the machine, there are filters and different things in the 1200 that the MPCs don't have and
Right.
never did have. But the reality of it is you can make the drums, I mean, you can't change the bit maybe in the MPCs, but you can kind of roll off some of the top end if you wanted to, which on some level is what you're doing. When you hear the less of the quality, it's just not as brilliant and high fidelity. It's sounding a little bit more muffled,
Yeah.
and that kind of dirtiness that people like. I think there are ways to kind of mimic that dirtiness, and you don't have to have the 1200.
Right. Does the MPC have like EQs like on it that would help you kind of achieve the sound that you wanted to, as far as getting the drums how you want them?
Absolutely. The 2000 had filters that you can go in and low pass, high pass filters.
Okay.
And you can manipulate the sound that way, which is a lot of technique. A lot of people use that technique to kind of make the bass low and have just the bass, sub out the bass and not have the high part. Like during that era, that was big. So the MPC had that and has that, still has it with even the software. And what was the other thing you can do? There were ways to play effects. The 2000 also had a card in there where you can do a lot of different things with reverbs, flange, different things to give it a different vibration than just whatever you put into it. So, yeah, and that's the thing about technology. There's always a conversation. It doesn't matter what you're using. It's all about the ideas. There's partial truth in that, but then there's also truth in the technology, because if I can get to something quicker using something that's more modern and something that's allowing me to do things that I could never do on the 1200, then by all means, I'm going to use this new thing to get to my ideas quicker.
It does make a difference,
absolutely.
Like when you put it like that,
absolutely.
There's certain things that certain machines can do, certain sounds that certain drum machines have,
Absolutely. So. The thing, like you mentioned, World War III. The funny thing about that, and to your question about the machine, the SP1200 let me down. I remember I had the session to go to Sony Studios to lay World War III the next day, and my machine crapped out on me. Like it would not load my disc. And I was like, how is this happening? I finally got it to load, but it didn't load the sequence. It just loaded the sounds. So I was like, what's going on? I went to Mancha's house, lived about 15 minutes away, and got his SP, and I had to reprogram the beat. So it wasn't quite the same as what I had. And I was even in the studio reprogramming parts of World War III because I had it laid out and it didn't
save it. So you kind of had to
redo the beat,
remake the beat.
Yeah, and that was a nightmare. Here's my opportunity. If I think about it now, this is my first time going into Sony Studios, professional studios, and I think we were in the A room at the time. If not, it was the B room, this is like Mariah Carey's room. We're in like a serious room to record this. Tony Maserati, I think, was the engineer for that. I believe.
Yeah, I definitely heard of him.
Yeah, big time engineer. He has plugins named after him. So we're in there, and I'm like, damn, my daggone machine just stopped working on me. What is this, a sign, God? What's going on? What's going on? But I worked through it and got it to be, I would say, in my feeling, about 99% of what it was when I originally made the beat, when it was just a demo.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And on songs like My Block and World War III, I noticed you have it's a drum pattern where it's like a stutter step, kind of in certain spots throughout the track. So did you discover that exploring the features on your drum machine, or do you tap it out live? What's the story on that?
Yeah, I used to. So we're going back now 20 years ago, and we're going back at a time when hip hop producers, typically made the drums feel like live drums. It was boom bap, but it felt comfortable. Right. For me, I thought that the drum machine tools, we should use them because they have something that a drummer couldn't do. Like a drummer can't necessarily, a good one can, but that kind of mechanized thing that you get when you hit note repeat and hold the sound down is not something that a real drummer would think to do and could do with that kind of precision of a machine. So it was on purpose, me messing with the machines, trying to make something feel like a hybrid between the machine and like a person. So I had a record called Guns. Guns was a song we never released. March and I worked on for Internal Affairs. And in that, I used a note repeat in the hip hop on the hi-hat. So the hi-hats were going, which became what we now see people do that all the time with trap beats. When I did that in '99, it was like, what the hell? But see, what I was doing, I heard it as the gun clicking. So you hold down. So I made the hi-hat click like that. Yeah. But people thought I was crazy for doing that. But, so the song was never released, huh?
You're too early.
way too early. Way too early. It was
it's interesting that you talk about like using note repeat and everything, because like behind me I have the book Dilla Time, and in that book he kind of like talks about how it's almost like a misconception of people thinking that what Jay Dilla did was only just not quantizing when he programmed his drums, but he actually figured out a way to use the MPC where he could make it sound like that. So it actually, like, the feel of it is actually even kind of different than what an actual drummer would do, So like, it's really kind of interesting.
I was talking to a friend of mine, also a producer by the name of Super Dave West. What he was telling me is there's a movie, 5 on the Black Hand Side, I think was the movie. At the end of the movie, there is, and this may be in the book, I didn't read the book yet, but there's in the movie, people are clapping on set to the music that was happening. So when they recorded the movie, they couldn't sync whatever the people were doing with the clapping to the sound. So the claps were kind of sloppy. They were they had a connection, a grid to them, but it wasn't gridded in with the snare of the song. So what Dave was telling me is I don't know if this was a conversation he had with him or the book or what it was, but he told me that JD heard that and was inspired by how that felt. That on-offness inspired him to. And here's the thing: if we listen to Jay Dilla's beats, they're not all the same like that. Like everything he did isn't the offness. It depended on what the song or what the sample or whatever called for that he did. Right. Some joints are just locked straight in. You can hear. Some of them do feel a certain kind of swing. But absolutely, like, people have the misconception that everything is unquantized. Hank Shockley from Public Enemy, he's a mentor of mine. He taught me what they would do a lot of times with the sounds. None of that stuff was quantized. They would fly it in or feel. One time they would throw things in, but some of that was due because of the technology. They were limited. So they didn't have the ability.
It one time because there was no click edit like
that's
undo.
Right. And everybody got their hand on something in the studio. It wasn't like you had program stuff. Everything was all programmed. So sometimes by necessity you come up with stuff. And for me, like when you talk about the drum stutter, that became something of me just trying to do something where I was a hybrid of the machine people. But also using this great piece of tech, to the fullest. That's really where it came from.
And something cool to give the track some variation.
That's key. That's key.
Like.
Keep people into ear candy. Ear candy is important.
And when you're producing beats, do you have an artist in mind usually? Or do you like just kind of make it and then say, I'll send it out and see, where it ends up,
It both ways. Sometimes if I get a call to work on a project, that is what it is. But in terms of like working and just having something in mind, that happens as well. Like, I'm thinking about I want to do a so and so track, or I'm feeling kind of like this. This particular record inspired me. Let me see if I can catch that kind of groove on another record that I do, something that I work on. But it varies, man. It's not really all or nothing unless it's something that I'm doing for the artist. Like for instance, got a call. D Dot is working. I don't know if I should even say this, but working on a record for Black Rob. You know, so of course he passed on, but this record, we're taking the vocals and different things. So I sent one thing off that they're working on for him now, but that was me thinking about D Dot. Actually, no, Black Rob. They actually sent me the vocals for that, and so and then Nasheem and I are going to work on some things as well for that project too. I don't know where that project is right now in terms of their final decisions on all the cuts, but
okay, so something will be coming out. Black
yeah,
Rob.
I believe. I believe
that'd be
so.
interesting. I always liked Black Rob. He was real dope.
Oh yeah,
like
great dude.
Like
too.
that life story. That's
man.
Classic, man.
Yeah, and a real cool dude, man. Like every time I met Black Rob, really nice, genuine dude. Just a real cool dude.
Can you think of any song that you where you made a beat and you had an artist in mind and it ended up going exactly to that artist?
That's interesting. I'm trying to think of somebody outside of Monch, because of course with him, quite often I know it's sometimes I know. Sometimes he picks something that I didn't think about for him, but to have something in mind for someone and it goes to that person, I have to look at not offhand. I can't even think of anything.
Okay, yeah.
Specifically.
But you said sometimes Monch will pick something that you didn't think he would pick.
Yeah, quite often that happens. With the album PTSD, one of the songs, I listened to the album and I thought it was missing something. I thought it needed something, and I sent him. This is an example of the opposite of what you just said, actually. So I made this track for him because it was what that record needed, and it ended up being Bad Motherfucker. That was a song that I made it specifically because I thought that the record was very cerebral, and I didn't. That Bad Motherfucker was his title. I actually wanted it to be called PTSD, Post-Traumatic Slave Disorder. I wanted the title, and I wanted him to talk about the disorder that Black people have based on the history of slavery. Right. Because the whole album was based on like mental health. So I thought that would be cool. He didn't do that. He made it more of a histrionic record, which is, when somebody has an inflated ego, I'm a bad motherfucker. So he took it in that direction, and the chorus was what it was. But that energy of that record was something I was like, this record needs some energy. This is what it needs. He's like, I could see why you say I need that. Okay, I'm gonna write to it. So he was in Australia at the time and wrote to it, and he sends back Bad Motherfucker. I'm like, I wonder why he decided to go in that direction. But then when I heard it, I was like, all right, that's cool. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But outside of I have to think on that. I'm sure there's something that way. It's just not hitting me right now.
Yeah, I guess because it probably just ends up where when you make a beat, you never know who's gonna gravitate to it. That's probably mostly what it is.
And most of the time, I'm working on stuff like just on vibe. The stuff I get more calls for stuff like a commercial and film. That stuff is a little different because it's a specific thing. Like working for artists, usually it's like, what you got, and it's like, here, check this out, and it's something that's chosen from there.
Yeah. And you also mentioned Simon Says, so like you, so I know, so Pharaoh produced that. Did you worked on that with him? Like,
yes, we worked on the Simon Says together. That was I remember the day he called me. We were working on the album Internal Affairs.
Yeah.
So he was watching a movie, you know, and the movie happened to be Godzilla with a friend of ours named Tyrone Chambers. And he was like, yo, check this out, man. So he plays the sample in the loop. I'm like, yeah, that's something. Bring it through. Let's work on it. So he laid it out in the 95012 at his house. Basically what I had heard, he brought it over. We started putting the drums and everything, shakers and all that stuff to it, put the intro to it and laid it out. And then I directed and recorded him on the vocals, you know, for the execution of the actual song. And there was a couple of different versions of that record too. You know, when he first did it, I was like, you know what, you need to come back around with the Get the Fuck Up, because it only happens once and then you go off into the tail end of the chorus. So we did an alternative version, and then when he did, I was like, nope, that's whack. Let's take it back to how you had it. Keep it raw, you know. So, you know, that was a phenomenal recording session. I remember the second verse for that particular record, when he was recording that, and I was sitting there listening to the groove, especially that run, Exorcist, Sexorcist, all of that. I was like, damn, this is it. So he comes out, he's like, I'm gonna do that again. I was like, nah, you got to listen to this. You ain't doing nothing again. Listen to this, because it was like the vibration of what was going on. I felt something special in that moment, you know, and thank God, like a lot of times when I feel that it works for me, you know, and it's something to go with. That happened on another record on the album that Manch actually had the words wrong, and he did change it, but he wasn't at the mix session. I'm not gonna tell you what it was, but we got to the mix session.
What song it is?
Because he would kill me. But the thing was, he said the words wrong, but it felt right. Yeah. So he didn't come to the mix session. So I'm in there with the engineer. He's like, there's two versions on this second verse. Which should be the one? I was like, let's use the first one, because that was the one that felt right. The second one was the one he corrected. So he always gets at me. It's like, yo, I can't even listen to that song because you used the wrong version. But no one knows. Like, no one knows. And it felt right. You know?
We probably wouldn't know.
It was a real small.
Unless you told us.
Yeah,
probably still might not know.
Probably not. So yeah, he and I worked on Simon Says together.
Okay, let me ask you something else about Simon Says. So like, how did you record the sample? So like, if he was watching it on TV or a videotape or something? So
the videotapes had audio outs. So you come out of the audio outs and you go into your sampler using little you know, the audio outs are the RCA cables. So you get the converter, the RCA cables to go to the quarter inch. Use the quarter inch, go into the sample and you record the samples that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah.